the secret George discovered about money and life. In a small village in the north of England, there lived an old man everyone called Lazy George. But no one knew that this so-called lazy man was about to learn one of life's greatest lessons. George spent most of his days sitting under an old oak tree on a wooden chair. He would gaze across the fields, dreaming of the future. "One day I'll open my own shop," he would say. "One day I'll buy land. One day I'll find a job where I work less and earn more." But that one day never came. People stopped laughing and began watching him with quiet pity. His wife, Margaret, often sighed and said, "George, life doesn't run on dreams, it runs on action." George would just shrug. "One day everything will be fine," he said. Time passed and reality grew heavier. Life became harsher and George felt the weight of every wasted day. One cold night, his grandson, Oliver, barefoot and weak, whispered, "Grandpa, is there anything to eat today?" Margaret opened the cupboard only to find it empty. George looked at the floor and felt something he had never felt before. Dreams cannot fill an empty stomach. That night he sat on his bed, hands on his chest, heart pounding. Tears pricked his eyes as he realized the harsh truth. Dreams alone do not feed a family. Fear, shame, and despair settled over him like a heavy blanket. The next morning, carrying that fear and shame, George went out to work in the fields. The cold cut through him, the sun blinded him, his back ached, and his hands blistered. He muttered to himself, "This isn't work, this is punishment." That evening he returned quietly. Dinner was only lentils and dry bread. Oliver asked, "Grandpa, how much did you earn today?" George answered, "Not much, but at least some. Not enough to survive." Medicines, bills, and food expenses swallowed the money before it could matter. One day, George overheard villagers in the market. "Saving is key. If you save, you survive." The words lodged in his mind. That night, he brought out a large glass jar and hid it under the bed. Every week, he dropped in a few coins. Clink, clink. The sound gave him hope. Oliver asked one day, "Grandpa, what is that?" George replied, "This is our future." But saving had a cost. No new shoes, less food. Margaret frowned. "If we're starving today, what good is tomorrow?" George said, "One day you'll understand." Months passed and the jar filled. George went to the market and laid the money on the counter. "3 sacks of flour, please," he said. The shopkeeper shook his head. "Prices have risen. That's barely 1 sack. Money sitting still loses value." George froze. At home, he counted the coins again. They hadn't grown. They hadn't changed. Oliver whispered, "Then what was the point of saving, Grandpa?" This time, George had no answer. Weakness grew and despair deepened. One morning, George saw his neighbors. Some were carrying eggs, some milk. Fear was absent from their faces. Each had a small system, a living, working source of value that grew every day. Then Oliver's old suggestion came to mind. "Grandpa, what if we raised chickens?" This time, George acted immediately. With his last coins, he bought a few chickens. As they clucked in the yard, Oliver laughed. "We have our own egg system." These weren't just chickens. They were a small system, alive, growing, and productive. On the first day, 1 egg, then 2. Some they ate, some they sold. Every egg was recorded in a notebook. Gradually, the yard filled, and villagers came to buy eggs. For the first time, work was no longer a burden. It had a purpose. George held an egg in his hand and said, "This is better than saved money. It feeds us, it grows, it works." Oliver smiled. "So you're not lazy anymore?" Tears welled up in George's eyes. "No, I finally learned." The jar under the bed was forgotten, and when anyone told George saving money is wise, he would just look at the chickens and say, Saving without action is just fear in disguise. Money sitting still shrinks. Even a chicken at least tries. That day, Lazy George learned life's greatest lesson. Build something that grows, even if you start small. This story teaches us that saving alone is not enough. Money does not grow by itself if you leave it idle. Small steps, consistent effort, and action in the right direction are always more powerful than dreams alone. For George, the chickens were not just eggs, they were freedom, security, and a living system that money sitting still could never provide.